Magine, it is the middle of January in the year 1650. You are lying in a drafty wooden cottage in the heart of rural England. Outside, the world is a void of absolute ink-black darkness, save for the faint silver glow of frost on the window pane. You went to bed at sunset, around 5 o'clock, and now you suddenly find yourself wide awake. The fire in the hearth has collapsed into a pile of glowing orange embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling. But you aren't frustrated. You aren't reaching for a phone or staring at the wall in an anxious panic about your productivity the next morning. You simply sit up, wrap a wool blanket around your shoulders, and begin to talk to your spouse. Or perhaps you pick up a book, or you pray, or you even walk over to a neighbor's house for a quick visit. You aren't suffering from insomnia. You are simply experiencing the watch, a period of calm, creative wakefulness that every human being on Earth once considered perfectly normal. Within 2 hours, you will drift back into a second, deeper sleep that lasts until dawn. This was the rhythm of the human species for thousands of years, a broken, beautiful, and deeply natural cycle that we have completely deleted from our modern memory. You have been told your entire life that an uninterrupted 8-hour block of sleep is the gold standard of health, but that idea is a historical lie. By forcing your body to sleep in one solid chunk, you are fighting against a biological architecture that was designed to be broken. And that fight is precisely why you feel so exhausted today. We have traded our natural rhythm for a mechanical one, and the shadows of our ancestors are the only things left to remind us of what we've lost. This shadow of the past began to reappear in the early 1990s, when a historian named Roger Ekirch stumbled upon something strange in the back aisles of the Public Record Office in London. He was researching the history of nighttime, looking through depositions, personal diaries, and old medical manuals. He began to notice a recurring phrase that didn't seem to make sense to a modern reader. People kept referring to their first sleep and their second sleep. It wasn't just a casual remark, it was a universal terminology. In the Canterbury Tales, Geoffrey Chaucer writes about a character who goes to bed after her first sleep. In old medical books, doctors advised couples that the best time for conception was between the first and second sleep, when the body was rested but the mind was still in a state of tranquil alertness. Ekirch eventually uncovered over 500 references to this segmented sleep pattern across multiple languages and centuries. It turned out that humans didn't used to go to bed and stay there for 8 hours. They would sleep for about 4 hours, wake up for 2, and then sleep for another 4. This middle period, known as the dorve, or the wakefulness, was a time of intense social and spiritual importance. People used this time to interpret their dreams, to reflect on their lives, and to connect with one another in a way that the frantic pace of the day didn't allow. But if this was the way we slept for nearly all of recorded history, where did it go? The answer lies in the shadow of the industrial clock and the invention of artificial light. As the Industrial Revolution took hold in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the way we viewed time underwent a violent transformation. Efficiency became the new religion, and the long, leisurely nights of the past were seen as a waste of labor potential. The introduction of gaslighting and later the electric light bulb pushed the shadows back. For the first time in human history, we could dominate the night. Suddenly, staying up late became a sign of status and productivity, and the watch between sleeps was squeezed out. Employers wanted workers who could sustain long, continuous shifts, and the medical establishment began to rebrand the natural midnight wakefulness as a disorder. By the mid-20th century, the idea of first and second sleep had been so thoroughly scrubbed from the cultural consciousness that anyone who woke up in the middle of the night believed they had a medical problem. We turned a biological norm into a clinical pathology. This shift wasn't just a change in habit, it was a fundamental rewiring of our internal chemistry. When psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted a landmark study at the National Institute of Mental Health in the 1990s, he stripped away artificial light from a group of subjects for a month. Within weeks, their bodies spontaneously reverted to the segmented sleep of the 17th century. They would sleep for 4 hours, wake up for 2 hours of quiet meditation, and then sleep for 4 more. Most strikingly, during those 2 hours of wakefulness, their bodies produced high levels of prolactin, a hormone that promotes a sense of peace and tranquility. We didn't just lose time, we lost a specific chemically induced state of human consciousness. The shadow of this loss stretches even deeper into our biology, specifically into a system that scientists didn't even know existed until 2012. While you sleep, your brain is performing a physical cleaning process that is as vital as breathing. Dr. Maiken Nedergaard and her team at the University of Rochester discovered what they named the glymphatic system. Think of your brain like a crowded city. During the day, as your neurons fire and you process information, the city creates trash. Specifically, it builds up proteins like amyloid beta and tau, the same proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. In a waking brain, there is no room for a trash truck to get through the narrow streets. But when you enter deep sleep, something incredible happens. Your glial cells, which support the neurons, actually shrink by about 60%. This creates space between the brain cells, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush through like a high-pressure fire hose, flushing the toxic proteins out of your brain and into the circulatory system to be disposed of by the liver. When we disrupt our sleep or force it into an unnatural compressed block, we are essentially canceling the trash pickup. Over years and decades, that cellular debris accumulates, creating a chemical fog that we've come to accept as a normal part of aging. This flush is most effective during the deep transitions between sleep stages, the very transitions that our ancestors navigated so naturally during their two-part nights. By forcing a single monolithic sleep block, we may be making the plumbing of our own minds less efficient, leading to the very brain fog and cognitive decline we fear most. This biological reality is further complicated by the shadow of our evolutionary ancestors. In 2015, Jerome Siegel, a professor of psychiatry at UCLA, traveled to the most remote corners of Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia to study the sleep habits of the Hadza, the San, and the Tsimane people. These are some of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, living in environments that closely mirror the conditions our ancestors faced for hundreds of thousands of years. What he found shattered the modern myth of the 8-hour sleep. These people do not sleep for 8 hours straight. In fact, they rarely sleep more than 6 or 7 hours total, and their sleep is often interrupted. Yet, they don't suffer from the chronic insomnia or the daytime fatigue that plagues the modern West. They don't have words for sleep disorders in their languages. Their sleep is dictated by the temperature of the environment rather than the presence of light. They drift off as the air cools and wake up when it reaches its lowest point, often moving around or talking in the middle of the night. This suggests that the 8-hour rule isn't just a modern invention, it's a geographic one. We have created a world of climate-controlled, brightly lit boxes, and then we wonder why our bodies are confused. Our ancestors lived in the shadows of the natural world, and their sleep was a fluid, adaptive response to the environment. But there is an even stranger reason why you might be waking up at 3 a.m., and it's known as the sentinel hypothesis. Evolutionary biologist David Sampson at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, conducted a study on the Hadza people by having them wear actigraphs, devices that track sleep-wake cycles. He found that in a group of 30 people living together, there was almost never a moment when everyone was asleep at the same time. Over the course of 20 nights, there were only 18 minutes total where every single adult was unconscious simultaneously. On average, 8 individuals were awake at any given moment throughout the night. This wasn't because they were stressed, it was a survival strategy. In a world of predators and rival tribes, having a sentinel or a guard awake at all times was a necessity. This explains why sleep patterns naturally vary by age. The teenagers stay up late, the elderly wake up early, and the middle-aged adults fill the gaps. Your midnight wakefulness isn't a glitch in your biology. It is an ancient survival mechanism. You are the descendant of the sentinels who stayed awake to keep the tribe safe. Your brain is scanning the shadows of your bedroom because, for 99% of human history, that was the only way to stay alive. When you wake up in the middle of the night and feel that sudden spike of alertness, you aren't broken. You are performing the exact task that your ancestors' lives depended on. The shadow of this evolutionary past is now colliding with the chemical reality of our modern world. Every moment you are awake, a molecule called adenosine is building up in your brain. This is what scientists call sleep pressure. The longer you stay awake, the more adenosine accumulates, binding to receptors and telling your brain that it's time to shut down. When you sleep, you clear that adenosine out. But in our modern environment, we have found a way to cheat this system. Caffeine is chemically almost identical to adenosine. When you drink a cup of coffee, the caffeine molecules rush to your brain and plug up the adenosine receptors like a piece of chewing gum in a lock. The adenosine is still there, building up like water behind a dam, but you can't feel it. Eventually, the caffeine wears off and the dam breaks, leading to the crash we all know too well. However, the real damage happens at night. Because we use caffeine and artificial blue light from our screens, we are artificially holding back the sleep pressure until it becomes overwhelming. We then crash into a deep, drug-like stupor that is different from the light, rhythmic sleep of our ancestors. We have traded the delicate, segmented watch for a heavy, artificial unconsciousness. We aren't sleeping, we are knocking ourselves out. This prevents the brain from moving through the necessary cycles of light and deep sleep that facilitate memory consolidation and emotional processing. This chemical interference creates a new kind of shadow, the shadow of chronic exhaustion. We live in a state of permanent social jet lag, where our internal biological clocks are constantly at war with the schedules imposed on us by work and school. Professor Charles Czeisler at Harvard Medical School has shown that even a small amount of artificial light in the evening can shift our circadian rhythms by hours. We are essentially living in a different time zone than our own bodies. This is why the 8 a.m. alarm clock feels like a physical assault. It's not just that you're tired, it's that you are being ripped out of a sleep cycle that your body thinks is still in its first sleep phase. For the pre-industrial human, the transition from sleep to wakefulness was gradual, mediated by the rising sun and the warming air. For us, it is a violent, mechanical interruption. We have replaced the natural ebb and flow of the night with a rigid binary. You are either on or off. But the human brain was never meant to be a light switch. It is more like a tide, rising and falling in complex patterns that we have spent the last century trying to ignore. The consequences of this ignorance are profound. When we look at the rising rates of anxiety and depression in the modern world, we rarely talk about the watch. But think about what was lost when we deleted those 2 hours of midnight wakefulness. That was a time specifically dedicated to the processing of the self. Without the distractions of the day, our ancestors could confront their fears, celebrate their joys, and integrate their experiences. Today, we fill every waking second with stimulation. When we wake up at night, we immediately reach for a phone, flooding our brains with blue light and dopamine-inducing information. We have replaced the dorveille, the sweet, quiet wakefulness, with doom scrolling. We have turned a period of healing into a period of stress. We are afraid of the dark, and we are afraid of our own thoughts, so we stay in the light until we collapse. But that light is a hollow one. It doesn't provide the rest we actually need. We are the most rested-looking, exhausted people in history. We have all the pillows, the weighted blankets, and the white noise machines, yet we wake up feeling like we've been in a fight. That's because we are in a fight. We are fighting a war against 3 billion years of evolution, and we are losing. To understand how to win this war, we have to look into the shadow of the myth that interrupted sleep is bad sleep. Most people believe that if they wake up in the night, the quality of their rest is ruined. But the science suggests the opposite. Segmented sleep might actually be more restorative because it aligns with the natural architecture of our REM cycles. When we sleep in one solid block, we often miss out on the extended periods of dreaming that occur in the later stages of the night. Our ancestors, by waking up and then returning to a second sleep, were diving straight back into those deep, dream-heavy states. This is where creativity lives. This is where problem-solving happens. Many of the greatest works of art and scientific discoveries in history were reportedly conceived during the watch. By trying to be more productive by sleeping in one block, we have actually made ourselves less creative. We have optimized for the factory floor at the expense of the human spirit. The myth of the 8-hour block isn't just a health guideline. It's an industrial tool designed to turn humans into more efficient machines. But you are not a machine. You are a biological entity with roots that go deep into the soil of the ancient past. So, what happens when we stop fighting the shadows? What happens when we accept that waking up at 3 a.m. is not a failure of our bodies, but a feature of our history? We begin to see that the anxiety we feel about our sleep is often more damaging than the lack of sleep itself. There is a term for this: orthosomnia, the obsessive pursuit of the perfect night's sleep. We track our sleep with rings and watches, obsessing over the percentages of deep versus light sleep, and when the data tells us we didn't hit the target, we feel stressed. That stress then makes it even harder to sleep the next night. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of exhaustion, but the Hadza hunter-gatherer doesn't have an aura ring. They don't know what deep sleep is. They just sleep when they are tired and wake up when their body tells them to. They live in harmony with the shadows, while we are trying to banish them. The paradox of the modern sleeper is that the more we try to control our sleep, the more it eludes us. We have forgotten how to trust our own biology. We have forgotten that our bodies know how to do this. We have been sleeping for millions of years. We didn't suddenly forget how to do it in the last century. We were simply taught to do it wrong. We have to realize that the 8-hour rule is a social construct, not a biological law. It was born in the era of the steam engine and the telegraph, and it is as outdated as they are. When you look at the history of the 19th century, you see the exact moment when the second sleep began to disappear from diaries. It happened first in the cities, where street lighting was first installed. It happened later in the countryside. By the 1920s, it was almost entirely gone. We are living through a massive, uncontrolled experiment on the human brain, and the results are coming in. We are more productive, yes, but we are also more stressed, more prone to chronic illness, and more disconnected from our internal lives. We have traded the mystery and the magic of the midnight watch for 2 extra hours of emails. Is that a trade you're actually happy with? The shadows of our ancestors are still there, waiting for us in the middle of the night. They aren't trying to scare us. They are trying to invite us back into a rhythm that actually sustains us. They are trying to tell us that it's okay to be awake in the dark. The biggest reveal of all is that your insomnia might actually be your greatest potential. If you can stop the panic, if you can put down the phone, those quiet hours in the middle of the night can become the most profound moments of your life. That is when your brain is in that unique prolactin-heavy state of calm. That is when the trash pickup of the glymphatic system is finishing its work. That is when your ancestral sentinel is satisfied that the perimeter is safe. If you lean into that wakefulness instead of fighting it, you might find that you don't actually need that second cup of coffee in the morning. You might find that your second sleep is more refreshing than anything you've experienced in years. We have been conditioned to see the night as a void, a blank space between days that needs to be filled with total unconsciousness. But the night is a landscape of its own, with its own peaks and valleys, its own specific types of consciousness. To be a whole human being, you have to inhabit the night as fully as you inhabit the day. You have to stop seeing sleep as a commodity to be optimized and start seeing it as a relationship to be nurtured. Think back to that room in 1650. The fire is low, the air is cold, and you are awake. You are not worried about your step count or your sleep score. You are just a human being, existing in the quiet center of the world. You are connected to the people around you and the history behind you. That peace is still available to you. It's sitting there in the shadows of your own bedroom, waiting for you to stop fighting it. The paradox is that the only way to finally get the rest you crave is to stop trying so hard to get it. You have to give yourself permission to wake up. You have to give yourself permission to be unproductive in the dark. Only then can you truly begin to sleep. The shadow of the industrial clock has been hanging over us for too long. It's time to step out from under it and back into the natural rhythm of the human soul. Your body isn't failing you when it wakes up at night. It is trying to save you. It is trying to bring you back to a version of yourself that hasn't existed for 200 years. The question is, are you brave enough to listen to it? Are you brave enough to turn off the light and see what's waiting for you in the watch? We've traveled from the frozen cottages of the 17th century through the high-tech labs of the modern day, and the message from every era is the same. Your sleep is not a single solid block of stone. It is a river that flows, breaks, and gathers again. When you find yourself staring at the ceiling tonight, remember that you aren't an insomniac. You are a sentinel. You are participating in a ritual that defined our species for ages, a quiet moment of transition that our modern world has tried to hide from you. That midnight wakefulness is not a symptom of a broken brain, but a sign of a brain that still remembers how to be human. It's a call to return to a slower, deeper way of being. So, the next time the darkness finds you wide awake at 3 a.m., don't fight it. Don't reach for the light. Just sit in the shadows for a moment and listen to the silence of history. Do you feel that ancient, calm alertness rising in your chest, or are you still trying to force your brain to follow a clock that was never meant for you? Whether you're a night owl, a morning lark, or an accidental sentinel, your journey through the night is uniquely yours. If this dive into the history and science of our hidden sleep patterns shifted how you see your own exhaustion, I'd love to hear about it. Have you ever experienced that second sleep without even realizing what it was? Tell me about your own relationship with the night in the comments. I'm genuinely curious if any of you have found peace in the middle of the watch. And if you want to keep exploring these hidden corners of our biology and history together, consider subscribing. We're going to keep chasing these shadows wherever they lead. But for now, just remember this one thing. Your exhaustion isn't a personal failure. You are simply a biological masterpiece living in a mechanical world, and no matter how much caffeine you drink or how many alarms you set, you cannot outrun the architecture of your own evolution. You aren't failing at sleep. You're just finally waking up to the truth.